8-6 suited plays quite well multi-way, so I decided to defend here, especially when you flop trips, of course. This it wouldn't be the worst time to slow play. So mostly you want to check raise here, but if you wanted to slow play trips, well, this one has a poor kicker, which is great. And you know, a lot of their bluffs are going to be hands like ace-5 suited or 10-9 suited, jack-10 suited, etc. So when you don't block any of their bluffs, you know, you don't mind giving them a free card, right? Because if they have like a 3 flush, 3 straight, they have so little equity, you don't mind seeing them turn a pair and like, you know, potentially calling your bets. So our villain bets a little bit over half pot. I don't mind check calling here sometimes. In general, our check calling range is going to be pretty tight here because I mean we mostly have a trip. We mostly have trips or nothing. When a random villain flats in the cutoff, I'm a little bit afraid that he has a better eight. Now, if let's say it were eight deuce deuce, I wouldn't be worried about a deuce making trips. I mean, it would make trips, but I don't think he would have it, right? Because how does he flat a deuce? But an unknown player may just be flatting hands like ace eight, king eight, 8-7, that type of stuff. Pocket ace is a clear defend. And now he bets 9 into 15. I think we at this point we should just be check calling, and we're not really folding any river for against any reasonable sizing, especially not now. So the question is, could we maybe lead here? Probably not. I mean, I think we should probably just be checking. Sweet spot to squeeze with ace king. So when he quickly checks behind, it tells me he might have had like 9, so that kind of sucks. Except he didn't and he was bluffing, so you know, of course we shouldn't be too results oriented. If he had 9s, you know, you'd be kicking yourself thinking, well, I should have just led. But you can't be too results oriented and think, well, against that hand I would have led, against, you know, 10 unsuited I wouldn't have led, because, you know, the only way I would have gotten any money out of him is if he'd bet. So I don't mind my play. So sevens is an ugly spot. I don't like flat calling in general, but three betting is a bit loose, right? So we can three bet this hand occasionally, but it seems tight. But folding is probably the standard play. Again, that's with the high rake structure. We also see that our opponent is from Russia, which means that it's more likely that he's a pretty good player. And still raising or folding in the small blind. King 9 suited. We're raising any suited king in the small blind against any reasonable stack. And we squeeze ace king against under the gun and cutoff. And so this player is a recreational player. So he cold called here. His range is probably way too wide. I mean, I don't think he should ever call here. He should just be shoving or folding pre-flop. So this play doesn't make much sense. So if we were to shove all in here, it's kind of a mergey shove, right? He can just fold lots of hands like, you know, Jack 10 suited, and we really don't mind that, right? He has an overcard and a gut shot. And even if we get it in, I mean, that's fine. We're still ahead. Even if we get it against a hand like 10-9, we're still slightly ahead, having a spade, I believe, and having a heart. But it's close to 50-50. So I think shoving is probably the best play. I mean, we're risking basically 20 to 126.5, and we're gonna get it in with over 40% equity, I believe. So I think shoving is the best play. If we check and he shoves, it's way more ugly. Yeah, I think shoving is the best play for underpot. And well, I mean, we don't need to discuss it that much, but that's a poor call, right? The pre-flop call is a large mistake, and on the flop, he may be thinking that I've got a draw and he's technically ahead, or maybe slightly, you know, behind, but he's got odds. But you know, he should still be folding. Jack's obviously always raising, and we get the 10-3-4 flop. Again, we see somebody flat calling, which I am not a big fan of. If we're going to c-bet at all on this board, Jacks, and especially if you have a diamond in your hand, wouldn't be the worst hand to c-bet. I mean, you have a hand which is extremely good, because we can expect villain to be 3-betting 10 sometimes, and, you know, probably pitch 3s and 4s, at least sometimes. So our hand is very good now, but there's a lot of ugly runouts, so getting value and protection makes a bit of sense. So actually, I would like to see myself c-bet here. Against a tough villain, you should be checking a lot more often, but he could just have a very, very wide range. 5-3 suited is normally a close fold. But I think we can open raise. And Jack 8 off, again, is a very close open raise. I'm not a big fan of villain's 3-bet size. This is way too large. So if you guys are wondering how large the 3-bet here at 100 big blinds, just make it a standard 9, right? If you go slightly smaller, slightly bigger, I'm not too bothered, but 12 is way too much. And as I said, Jacks, I would like to see myself c-bet. And so we're c-betting all kinds of hands, right? Some draws, some backdoor draws, some pairs, some over pairs, some sets. But we're also check raising all kinds of stuff. We want to basically cover all types of runouts. The 9 is a little bit of a concern because 9s do make sense, for him to call pre-flop and call on the flop. And, we would sometimes see bet 9s on the flop, but definitely not always. So I'm a little bit concerned, but I think we can end up value betting again here. And he folded. So I probably had a hand like 6s or so. When I see that strategy by me there, it pains me because I know deep down that was not the correct way to play that hand technically. But again, we're playing against players who could be cold calling that spot like 30% or so. So, looking at a pile output is not going to work unless, of course, you sim it for, let's say, potentially 30% cold call. If that were a top regular, I definitely would not have played my hand that way. But again, it doesn't matter, right? Because we're not playing against a top regular. King 8 is a standard open as well. King 7 is more of a fold, but you can potentially raise that. I would guess that at NL10 against your average opponent, you can raise King 7 off profitably, assuming you're comfortable post flop. King 8 off, very easy fold. That would have been a huge mistake calling. I mean, a pretty large mistake, not a huge mistake. Some standard folds. You guys do see that I'm quite inefficient here. I'm not using a program like Stars Helper, which I would definitely recommend because I keep on clicking the 225 button. A program like Stars Helper or another program like Table Ninja, for instance, can just do that for you. Also, I'm not automatically rebuying, which is a bit annoying, but I have it set that way. So if you only intend to play under big blinds, just have auto rebuy on. Just saves you some time, so you can play a few more hands an hour. We would have liked to V-pimp these 6s, but against 4x raise, I guess we just got to pitch it. I guess he just liked his hand and wanted to make it a big pot. We don't hate 5s going multi-way. If you flop a set, that's quite nice. If we had a hand like jacks or queens, we would hate it. We don't want that hand to go multi-way. All right, let's slow down. Got a lot of spots here. So queen 6-3 is an interesting one because both villains could have all 3 sets. Maybe Omar and Bobby would sometimes squeeze 9s, but they'd also flat call sometimes. And they can definitely have 6s, and Bobby can definitely have 3s, Omar perhaps. And then they can still have maybe some hands like 10s or hands like 8s and hands like 8-7 suited. So I'm not too stoked. Even if I had a hand like jacks, I'll be happy with my hand, but not overly happy. 5s here facing this half pot stab. I think we should probably end up check folding. If our opponent's quite aggressive, we can call once. And it's just important that we also add hands that can call multiple times, right? So we got a hand like pocket 9s. Why don't you check call sometimes, right? Because when you have 2 9s in your hand, you're often going to get a lot of bad folds, and your hand is good on almost any run out, so you can slow play that. Queen jack suited, we would have loved to flat call or 3-bet, but cold 4-bet, it's okay, but it would be a bit loose. As a standard, if you would ask me like, should I 4-bet this hand or not? Probably not. It's a bit loose. 10's easy open raise, and we see ace 8-4 against a small blind, not the big blind. That makes a bit of a difference. I'd like to still see myself bet here. We should definitely be checking back quite a bit more, but so we cannot bet everything here. Definitely not. But ace queen, as a standard, we can just be betting, especially if our opponent perhaps calls too many hands. Quick call. And turn is pretty close. If we believe that our opponent has a super wide range, then betting again makes sense. As a standard, you probably want to check. I mean, you have so many better hands to bet with, like ace king or ace queen with a diamond or fours or flushes, two pairs, that type of stuff. You can't just bet every single good hand. And this hand is barely good, right? And getting check raised would be a disaster. So checking makes sense. And it's an ugly run out for us. Um, so our opponent bets one. So basically, I mean, it's really ugly. I think again we should probably end up calling. Um, we saw the Queen Jack offsuit hand, right? And this was not the same villain, but I think it's entirely possible that about 1 in 10 times he just overplays an ace, right? He just has a hand like Ace Nine offsuit or Ace Nine spades. He check folded 3 times in a row. He's like, fuck this. I don't want to check fold anymore. I'm just betting the minimum. So yeah, he could just have a random hand as well. So do we win this hand like 1 in 10 times? Yes. Are we going to win it more than half the time? No, right? But that's okay. You could lose this hand a bunch of times in a row and it will feel dirty, but I think it's the right call. So I'm not saying, hey, if the bet's a small, just station everything, right, guys? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying here in this spot, I think calling is best. um, I remembered the other hand I talked about. I didn't remember this flat call. So yeah, as I said, I said he can maybe overplay an ace. While in this case, he overplayed 4-6 offsuit. I'll definitely make a note of this, guys, because as you see, I'm not playing with a HUD. So I'll just write down like flat call, small blind, super wide range, right? You could also make a note about the min bet if you like, but keep it short. So yeah, that's the reason why we call here. You see too many random hands. Had he bet 3/4 pot, let's say, I probably would have ended up folding. Ace 4 suited is 3-bet sometimes. And ace 10 here. So this is annoying because, okay, on the one hand, ace 10 offsuit is a very bad hand to call a 3-bet with. I'll tell you right now. On the other hand, this player, instead of going from 225 to, let's say, 10 or 11 or maybe even larger, he went to 6. So he didn't even triple my raise size. So on the one hand, our hand is not very good. On the other hand, we're getting an amazing discount, right? And third, which could be most important, is that since he used this sizing, he's probably not the greatest player ever. So we also have a bit of a post-flop skill advantage. So given my supposed skill advantage as well as the odds, I think we end up calling here. But what I don't want you guys to do is write down like, oh, my coach, if I can call myself your coach for this these 40 minutes, don't write down, oh, my coach tells me to call 3-bets with ace 10 offsuit, because that's not what I'm trying to say, right? Ace 10 offsuit, button versus the blinds, even then it's very, very close, and oftentimes we end up not calling our hands. But in any other spot, calling is losing quite a bit. Your hand is dominated. You're not suited, so you can't make a flush. You can't, let's say, shove over turn bets with flush draws, etc. Your hand is trash. Maybe not trash, but it's not very good. I'd way rather call a hand like ace 5 suited, or I'd call a hand like 6-7 suited here. Obviously, a hand like king 10 suited. But with all that said, I think we can probably end up making a call. I could be convinced that this is a losing play. It's either winning small or losing small. I don't feel too strongly either way. But again, with my supposed skill edge, I think I can make this call. And this is kind of the issue, right? You just flop, mediocre hands a lot, and you're going to get run over a little bit.